Welcome, everyone, to another rousing edition of Three Side Sports Talk. Todd Kleinheinz, Jeff Krapinski, and Jerry Sue with you as always. We're going to be talking a lot of football today, but we want to also get it out there that we're going to be answering questions. So when you write your reviews on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube, feel free to throw in some questions. We'll get those answered. Also hit us up on Twitter at Three Side Sports. And let's just dive right into it because I actually dove into kind of a tangent of research. But before we get into those types of things, Jerry, you were just about to let loose an avalanche of information because I could tell you had Deshaun Watson on your mind, but how you thought it was going to progress. So take it from there.
Well, in terms of Deshaun Watson, because we were talking right before we started recording, I was just saying that things seem to have grinded to a halt because I think teams are waiting on him, right? I guess it would either be the first domino to fall or the last domino, but I think every team who's hoping to get a shot of acquiring him if he is made available, they're waiting for him. So if like you're the Denver Broncos who would seemingly want to move on from Drew Lock, you want Deshaun, but if you don't get Deshaun, what is your backup, right? And so are they really going to wait it out, or are they going to try to move on like a Carson Wentz because Carson Wentz is currently available?
Well, I don't know if so much is waiting on Deshaun. Deshaun said what he wants. It's waiting on Houston, right? What's Houston going to do?
Yeah. That's why I meant the Deshaun situation.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I don't know, maybe you've heard that somewhere, but I haven't heard anything about the Broncos hell-bent on moving on from Drew Lock. I don't know about that. I mean, if that's the case or not, but seems like the first domino to fall, maybe Carson Wentz.
I would think that Carson Wentz is going to probably be the first domino, but it's kind of a domino of one, in my opinion, because I don't think Deshaun and Carson are tied up in terms of the teams that are actively pursuing either of them. I mean, by all accounts, it's the Bears and the Colts who are kind of in on Carson Wentz, and it's been reported out there that there's an offer on the table of 2 second-round picks for Wentz. And the fact that Philly hasn't pulled the trigger and has kind of pulled back and hasn't engaged in further negotiation kind of indicates that's a stalling point right there. They want a 1. These teams are kind of offering a couple 2s, and now that's just going to be a waiting game. As for Deshaun, I heard a report on ESPN this morning that out of Denver that the Broncos were willing to, they were in on Stafford. They're going to be in on Deshaun. And if Russell Wilson happens to be out there, they'll be in on that. But they're not moving on from Drew Lock unless, similar to the Niners' philosophy and what's been reported, they're going to get a drastic upgrade. So they don't seem to be in on Wentz or any of these other quarterbacks, which is fine. I mean, each team kind of, to their own. The thing that perked my ears up the most was hearing from a Carolina Panther reporter today that the Panthers are ready to offer 3 1s and Christian McCaffrey to Houston. Now, it's that's got to be enticing. I mean, you're talking about you're getting Christian McCaffrey, you're getting the number 8 pick. I mean, you're moving Deshaun from the AFC to NFC. Houston's got to be licking their chops if, in fact, that's on the table or in discussions.
Right, and that's my point, is that there are going to be so many teams in on Deshaun, in the Deshaun situation, hoping to acquire him. I mean, you talked about the Chicago Bears being in on Wentz. I'm sure they'd love to try to acquire Deshaun as well. So I think that's what I was getting at. But in related news, as far as the Houston Texans are concerned, I was totally shocked. I don't know how you guys felt, but I was totally shocked when they decided to release J.J. Watt. I mean, I'm psyched for J.J. that he got his wish and now has the opportunity to go to a winning team. But I was stunned that the Texans just let him go for nothing, considering that Watt was still under contract and they didn't make him honor it the way they're forcing Deshaun Watson to do so. I mean, sure, Watt is older. I get it, but he's still a prominent face of the franchise for Houston and would definitely still be an integral part of their team. So why grant Watt his wish why was Houston so eager to, and I quote, make sure we did right by him, as the Texans said in their press release, when at the same time they refused to offer the same type of respect for Deshaun when he's given everything he's had for the organization. And as much as I don't want to use the race card, I can't help but notice that they treated Watt like a man, perhaps because he's white, and they're treating Watson like he's their property. So, it's no wonder Deshaun wants to get the heck out of there.
Yeah, I'd say that's way off. I mean, if JJ Watt was 25 coming off of Defensive Player of the Year, you think they would have just let him go? Of course not. I mean, there's a reason he's almost 10 years older, missed half of the games in the past 2 seasons, is 32 with a big price tag. I mean, JJ is the next team he goes to, he's going to be a spot situational pass rusher. And, there's a reason he's looking at the teams who can win a championship. He's looking to find a ring in the next 2 years, because there's no way his body's not going to be able to hold up and whatnot. Deshaun is 25. He's got a decade of prime quarterbacking left. And I was mildly surprised that they just let Watt walk, without getting anything. But it soon came out after that the value of JJ Watt on the trade market was like a 5th rounder. And are you going to hold the face of your franchise for the past 10 years hostage for a 5th rounder? No. So it's a lot easier to say, hey, JJ, we're going to do you a solid. We're just going to let you go. Because in essence, we're not getting anything for you anyway. We're rebuilding. So, why get into another pissing match with, this guy? So, if I'm the Texans, it's a lot easier to say goodbye to JJ Watt. He gave you his prime years. Deshaun is just entering that.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on Watt. At first, I thought the same thing. I was surprised that they would just let him go. You're not gonna get anything for him. I don't know what the market was. Like you said, if it was a 5th rounder, I'm just surprised they would just let him go, being that he was under contract. Maybe it's because, right, he's well past his prime. When you think about it, he's given so much to the organization or to the city, that type of thing. So they just said, okay, fine, well, let's let you go. I guess those are the reasons for that. Deshaun's just stepping into his prime, and the fact that he's a quarterback. It's not being mistaken there. And as far as getting a guy like Watt, I'm like you, Todd. I'm like, well, he's going to be situational. I don't know. I'm not really interested in even signing a guy like JJ Watt at this point.
Yeah, I hear what you guys are saying. I get that Watt is not at the same point in his career as Watson. I hadn't heard that the teams were only offering a 5th round pick for him, because it seems like a lot of teams are interested in signing him. But I guess the fact of the matter is Houston held Watt's contractual rights, just as they do for Deshaun. And just as JJ has given the Texans his all while he's been in Houston, Deshaun has done the same with 2 divisional titles in, yes, just 4 years. But I don't know, to me now there are clearly some irreconcilable differences from Deshaun's viewpoint. So why not make sure they do right by Deshaun?
Well, we don't know that they're not, but.
Well, they're not, because he's asked to be traded.
Yeah, but
and they're holding firm that they won't.
Absolutely. But that's your negotiation point. If you all of a sudden say, yeah, we're going to trade you, every team's going to no team's going to come in with overwhelmingly Christian McCaffrey and 3 number 1s. If they're saying, no, we're not trading him, the only way to get them to, well, let's consider that, is to blow them away with a, wow, that's almost too hard to turn down.
Yeah, I don't know. I disagree. I think once it becomes official that Houston is open for business, you will have teams tripping over themselves, offering, their left arm for Deshaun.
Of course, but in my deep dive of research this week, did you know teams can only trade picks 3 years out? So the Niners couldn't offer 5 years worth of number 1s. A team can only offer 3 years worth of picks. So that goes back to, why does the Jets and Miami hold more cards? Because they have extra picks this year. So
did that rule apply way back when Minnesota traded for Herschel Walker? Because I seem to recall Minnesota offering 5 first-round picks or something silly like that.
3 years worth of picks they had. So if the which is why it makes sense now that I started to hear, oh, the Panthers are offering 3 number ones and McCaffrey. It's kind of like, well, why 3? Well, you can only offer 3. So, which is bad news for the Niners, because if they only have their 3, how else are you going to get incentivized to trade Deshaun? So the Niners are really going to have to hope Deshaun has the Niners way up on his priority list. And if he has them way up on their priority list, it's going to be a benefit to get him to the NFC. But then again, I mean, I'll throw it out there. If you're the Texans, you're open for business, and Carolina offers you 3 number ones and Christian McCaffrey, including the number 8 pick this year, and the Niners offer 3 number ones and Nick Bosa, which way are you going?
Well, if Deshaun didn't have a no trade, then that would be a no-brainer, right? You'd go Carolina.
Right.
But I guess it's what we talked about right from the get-go, was that in order for Deshaun to end up in San Francisco, he would have to demand that he'd want to go to the Niners.
Right. So if he's interested in going to a team like the Niners, then that's what's going to push it that way, of course.
Right. Otherwise, if he opens it up to, well, I can go to any of these 5 teams, then yes, then the Niners would be at a tremendous disadvantage.
Yeah, which is why, again, it's bothersome to me during this whole situation. Deshaun has not said anything. He hasn't spoken to the Texans. So all we've heard is through his agent, he's requested a trade. And that was it. I mean, why not have more? Why not come out with something else? I mean, it's just left to conjecture by everybody else as to what he's thinking. Not to mention, the Texans are reaching out to you. Why not answer the phone and said, thanks for the 4 years. Here's my list of 5 teams. Go get the best package you can, because I'm not reporting to you. You know, I mean, and that's what would move this along, is opening up those communication fields.
Well, like you said, we've heard nothing from Deshaun directly, but we don't know that his representation hasn't been in communication with the Texans, right?
No, of course not. But that's my point is, you know.
And that's what they're hired for, right? Deshaun doesn't need to have the now maybe that would help, right? Maybe that's what is needed to move this forward, the way JJ Watt had a face-to-face with Houston, right, and then ultimately got his release.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't know. That's why, back to my original point, I mean, you look at JJ Watt, he asked to be released. The team quickly accommodated. Matt Stafford asked to be traded. His team quickly accommodated. But yet, you know, when like players like Jalen Ramsey and Jamal Adams asked to be traded, their teams wouldn't oblige until they were kicking and screaming to get out.
Well, I guess the big caveat there is he's the quarterback and he's young, but the biggest one is he's the quarterback. Much different than this old kind of still okay pass rusher guy, right? Like he's just being that he's the quarterback. That's going to change everything.
And it's, I mean, you're right. When the Texans open the door for trading, when they just go, which I don't know how dug in they are. Caserio seems to be very dug into, we're not trading him. But again, that could be posturing for leverage. As soon as they say we're open for business, I mean, why aren't you going best offer by end of day Friday? We're making this deal, because you can't drag this. Once it's known things are open, you can't drag out. It's got to be quick. It's got to be, you know, rip the bandaid off and get it over with, so both sides can move on. And there's just, as much as my thoughts have swayed tremendously over the past weeks from, oh yeah, they're going to trade him as soon as possible, to they're not trading him. They're just not. I mean, they're going to drag it, because they're going to drag it to the point where these teams have to go to option be like, hey, it's draft time, it's mini camp time, it's whatever. We can't go in with Drew Lock if we're not sold on Drew Lock or Tua or Sam Darnold or whoever. These teams have to move forward at some point. And if the Texans don't swing open those doors and say best trade available, they're going to screw themselves, which isn't out of the realm of possibility considering how they've done things anyway.
Yeah. But and your buddy Dan Sileo had mentioned that the Niners were going to go hard or be all in. Is that what he said?
I believe it was all in. Yes.
Yeah. So what does that mean then? Does that just mean, sure, we'll throw in our 3 first rounders and see where that gets us? Because if you can't, extend your offer beyond, you said 3 years of worth of first rounders, then, where does that leave the Niners? Is that just cool? We'll throw our 3 first rounders in and let's start there and see if they bite.
Some second rounders, some third rounders, Jimmy Ward, Eric Armstead.
All in.
Well, I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because if there's positions that the Niners not are deep in, but positions that, boy, Shanahan just interchanges parts, I could see Brandon Ayuk being part of a trade. You got Debo, you got George Kittle. You're going to go in and get another wide receiver. Deshaun's going to make everybody better. So if you're the Niners, 3 1s and Brandon Ayuk, who was our first rounder last year and was, significant, production as a rookie. I mean, that's if you're the Niners, that's where you're going with. You're doing whatever you can not to put Bosa in, not to put Warner in, because that is it's thin to begin with. It's a stalwart unit. So, and it's kind of the side of the ball that Shanahan can't scheme. He can scheme running backs and all these guys open. So it's not going to surprise me if we start hearing Ayuk as part of this trade, if in fact the Niners are all in.
Yeah. What if they ask for Javon Kinlaw
instead of Brandon Ayuk?
Or in addition?
Yeah, there's I'm not closing the book on anybody. Like if you're the Texans and you call me and you say 3 number 1s, Kinlaw and Ayuk. All right, well, let me get John Lynch and let's have this discussion and have this negotiated. We're not jumping through hoops, because it's probably going to end up being no. It'll probably be, well, how about 3 number 1s, a 2 next year, and Ayuk instead of, it's going to be that type of thing. So to me, the Niners have to make sure that they get into free agency this year, shoring up as many depth needs as they can. And I think that's why we're seeing these guys get signed, like these backup safeties and these backup linemen, just because if the Niners do go all in and surrender these number 1 picks, that's a huge weapon in terms of building the roster with those number 1 picks. So,
yeah, and if the Niners aren't able to acquire Watson and are stuck with Jimmy this season, I don't see any path for them to remain a championship contender. I mean, according to the Athletics' Tim Kawakami, he's spoken with John Lynch, who supposedly believes that Jimmy's contract as it currently stands is just fine. Apparently they're not worried about it, which I don't get. It might be reasonable if we were still pre-pandemic, but with the unplanned diminished salary cap, I think Jimmy's contract severely limits what we can do in terms of free agency. And I'm not even talking about signing free agents from other teams. I'm talking about being able to keep our own, like Trent Williams, and restricted free agents like Emmanuel Mosley. And, they'll probably, if they keep Jimmy, draft a backup quarterback, but that's not likely going to be good enough right out of the chute to push Jimmy to be better. And if Jimmy gets hurt, then good luck to that rookie.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot there. I mean, back to what Todd was talking about real quick. We've been searching for receivers for a long time. So that's the only thing where I'm hesitant there to get rid of one that looks like he's promising. But yeah, I mean, I guess any name is a possibility to get the quarterback that you need. Which is why I don't know if, like, mentioning all those people, I don't see the Niners doing that and pulling that trigger for Deshaun. I just don't see it happening, I guess. I mean, I'd like to be surprised, but I just don't see it happening because you're giving up so much and so many draft picks, so much capital. But yeah, I mean,
so are we screwed either way?
I don't know.
I don't know if we're screwed. I just think it goes back to what we talked about a month ago when this first came up, was the Niners aren't in a power position unless Deshaun comes out and says, I want to, unless he goes on Instagram with a Niner hat going, wherever you guys want to trade me, I'm willing to go, like type of thing. I mean, right. He has to make it known to the Texans that that's his top priority, because if he just says, hey, I'll go to Miami, I'll go to Carolina, I'll go to Dallas, I'll go to San Francisco, and Caserio starts making those calls and goes, what are you giving me? What are you giving me? All those teams are going to have, or most of them are going to have a quarterback to offer, such as Tua, such as Sam Darnold, such as Drew Lock, at a cheaper rate than Jimmy. So, the Niners aren't getting the benefit of, oh, well, we can give you this. And they have higher first round picks this year. Yeah. So the packages from those teams are going to be more, more amiable for the Texans to, digest, even though I don't think whatever they get is going to be equal value, because you just don't trade a 25-year-old top 5 quarterback. But going back quickly to the free agency and the contract, not to be the bearer of bad news, but if Dee Ford doesn't get healthy, that's going to screw the Niners, because if he's not healthy on April 1st, if he can't pass a physical, he's guaranteed $11.6 million, whether he suits up for the Niners this year or not. And his contract is basically like $15 million. So if you cut him, you're responsible for the 11.6 because he's injured, and his signing bonus, which is like $7 million. So cutting him, an unhealthy Dee Ford, is going to cost you $5 million more. So that's going to be a hindrance if he can't pass a physical. Otherwise, Dee Ford's going to be back on the team because it's going to cost them less to keep him. So that's one of those things, opposed to Weston Richburg, who can be cut because he doesn't have an injury settle or an injury guarantee, and his $3.5 million over the next 2 years, just is accelerated, so the Niners would get some cap relief. But going back to your point, Jerry, of trying to sign our free agents and other free agents and build around this team, if in fact the Niners think Jimmy's the guy, the Dee Ford contract is going to be the hindrance.
I mean, yeah, and even if Jimmy's amenable to restructuring his contract, I mean, that'll still give them very little. It'll give them some wiggle room, but still not enough because of things like the Dee Ford situation.
Yeah, and if they want to compete and stay competitive, like you were saying, Jerry, drafting Trey Lance at 12 doesn't really help them in the right now. So that'll be a hindrance as well. And then you're paying Jimmy all that money, and we trying to re-sign other guys, and we draft a quarterback because maybe we need to draft a quarterback, but then we're still paying Jimmy. So yeah, it's a tough one.
Right. And apparently in listening to Michael Lombardi, he was on the Pat McAfee show earlier this week. He made it sound like the Mariota contract is cumbersome as well, because something that I didn't know before was that if he's traded and he's traded to a team to become a starting quarterback, his contract jumps from 10 million to 20 million. So unless Mariota's cut, I don't think he'd be an option for the Niners either.
Yeah. I mean,
he's still saving a little bit.
Let me throw a name out. Let me throw you a name, because this just happened today. The Pittsburgh Steelers came out and said, hey, we really love you, but we're not paying you $41 million next year. So, it's out there. They're going to have to do something, whether it's a drastic restructure, which I don't think does them a whole lot of good, because it just basically extends that $40 million over a couple years. And I don't know if Ben's got a couple years. If Ben gets cut, what do you think about Roethlisberger coming in for a much smaller paycheck than Jimmy? Even say it's the 20 million, say it's 15 to 20 million. I mean, clearly that is the bandaid quarterback because he's not there for very long. But if you draft Justin Fields, Trey Lance, what are your thoughts on Roethlisberger as the bandaid?
Gosh.
Yeah.
For me, I'd have two problems. My first problem really is how would he mesh with this team personality wise? I'm not sure if, I don't know what kind of a leader he is. I mean, he has baggage from, I know it's been a while, but he has those, sexual assault charges. I just don't think the Niners are willing to go back in that direction, for the sake of, hey, can we get something out of this guy talent wise?
Yeah.
So I just don't think that Roethlisberger would be a fit for all those reasons. Plus, given his age and where he's at, in his career, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure which direction you were going. I was just going to say, for the sake of argument, no thanks. I don't want Ben. I don't think he's too old. If he learn new system, he's not mobile. I'll stick with Jimmy. I mean, even might be a cap savings. I don't see that.
No,
his best days are behind him.
Absolutely. I do not want him. Not at all. I mean, but in these days of, quarterback carousel, when a name like Roethlisberger comes open, it's going to be intriguing to some teams because are there teams that might think they're Ben Roethlisberger away to making a difference? I'm in all those reasons you guys said, scheme wise, baggage wise, immobile, age. Those are all the reasons I would also agree with you that Roethlisberger would not be, a fit for the Niners, because in that case, I'd rather keep Jimmy, because at least he's been in the system. At least we know if healthy, he is an average quarterback. And again, we've talked about it, but if Jimmy was healthy this year, regardless of what their record was, say they went 8-8, right? They still missed the playoffs. They just had a bad year, and Bosa got hurt and Jimmy couldn't carry him. I don't know if we'd be having as much discussion about Jimmy, because my problem is his unavailability is what is hindering the team, because it puts him in a having to play Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard, conundrum.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, we even saw that when he was in New England, right? This inability to stay healthy. When he got that shot, when Tom Brady was suspended, I mean, what is it? The second game that he played in, he got hurt. So
yep. I'm
not sure you can just bank on Jimmy being healthy again. And I don't know So according to the NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah, when he's talking about quarterbacks, right? There's that some quarterbacks are trucks who can carry the team, while other quarterbacks are trailers who are highly dependent on everything around them and need to be pulled to get to their destination. And in addition to Jimmy's health issues, I mean, he's definitely more of a trailer and not a truck.
Yeah, no. I don't think there's any doubt about it. The problem is, like always, there's only 10 trucks in the NFL. Like 2/3 of the teams are going to have a trailer. It's okay, you're the trailer, but are we going to soup up this trailer as best we can because it's going to, get us to where we want to go? And that's I think the problem with the Niners. They got a nice trailer. It works for them. Like it does kind of what they need. It keeps blowing a tire every time they turn right, and we're running out of tires to replace the trailer. So it's no wonder that they're all in on Deshaun. I mean, as your buddy Dan Sileo likes to, suggest, because they want a truck. Every team wants a truck. It's just finding that truck.
And is that where they're, I mean, and is that the direction you think that the Niners will be headed in this offseason, that Jimmy will ultimately just be that bridge quarterback this season, and that they're just going to draft somebody to move on?
Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't get the sense of that. They keep saying, no, Jimmy's the guy. So unless they get Deshaun, I can see Jimmy being there for multiple years, whether they draft a guy or not, and just going with that and building a team around him, unless we're just going to draft a guy and play him as soon as Jimmy gets hurt, and then he's expendable if the guy does well. But it's I don't know. It's just fun to keep talking this into a circle. Like, are we keeping Jimmy? Are we not keeping?
My thought on the situation is, if they're going to draft a quarterback, I think they need to do it this year. I mean, I think this was kind of, because come next year, if Jimmy is the starter and he's healthy, they're probably, low point being 8-win team. So like, this is as good of a situation in terms of draft position as they're going to be in. So unless they're going to, pick whoever's available at 12, whether that's Justin Fields or Trey Lance, or make a push to get up into the top 5, which at this point might seem like an inexpensive proposition when you're talking about 3 1s, a 2, Brandon Ayuk, when you say, well, we'll trade you our 1 this year and our 1 next year to get up to number 7. All of a sudden, 2 number 1s, you're like, oh, that's a bargain basement deal. We'll get up there and, we'll target whoever we want, or almost whoever we want. So if they're going to do it, they have to draft the quarterback. I would say the difference making quarterback this year. I think Shanahan's always going to, look in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds for a quarterback,
and then keep Jimmy while you draft a quarterback, you're saying.
Well, I mean, don't forget about birthday boy Josh Rosen. I mean, right. Josh Rosen just had his birthday yesterday, 24. We're still talking about a young guy who is unproven, not so much unproven as not given a real shot at proving himself.
Yeah.
The fact that the Niners kind of locked him up even before, he got to any sort of free agency suggests he's gonna be part of the quarterback room. Maybe that's a thought process. But again, it's a process that they're going to need to see him get out there on the field, which they're going to need that bandaid quarterback just in case Rosen goes out there and is not good.
Well, what's funny is we talked about a little bit, I think, in text earlier, that other podcast that I heard these guys talk about the same thing we've talked about before. And what I'm worried about is that Shanahan doesn't want that guy. So we're talking about it like this is all fun to talk about. We want Deshaun, but I'm pretty sure Shanahan, unless he's being overruled by Lynch, doesn't want that guy. So we're not going to get that guy anyway, because he's going to either draft a Mac Jones or stick with the Josh Rosen or bring in a freaking Roethlisberger who just stands there and runs his system. So that's what's frustrating about this whole situation.
You know what we need to do? We need to get Daniel Kilgore on our show. We need to book him as a guest. Daniel Kilgore, are you listening to our podcast? Because if so, he would be the perfect guy, because he was part of the previous regime right before Shanahan. He was there that 1 year, right? He was the first year that Shanahan took over. So he knows Shanahan. And he was in Miami when Josh Rosen was there. So he'd be the perfect guy to answer all these questions.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to, because that's the type of information you would need, or that would be beneficial, to us, to people who are listening, just to hear. Now, granted, you rarely have guests come on and say, yeah, that guy is an a-hole. That guy is trash. That guy, I can't get far enough away from that guy, but reading between the lines, anytime, a guy would say, yeah, he had a difficult time, or he just rubbed people the wrong way. Those are all red flags that you would get. And then you'd have to go, all right, well, I guess kind of those things that people have talked about under the surface kind of are there all the time. So, but I'm all for it. Let's do it. Let's find Kilgore, get Kilgore. He could easily, explain kind of, and you're right, being on the Shanahan end of the spectrum, the Dolphins with Rosen, it'd be fascinating.
All right. That's your job, Todd. Book him.
Yes. Aren't you the booker? Isn't that your job title? Anyways, one other thing that I wanted to get to about the Niners, quarterback wise, is we've talked about we think, wouldn't the Jets' philosophy be the same as Shanahan's philosophy because they came from similar the similar trees as they were here. So I'm almost willing to, we don't even have to have that Sam Darnold conversation, or we shouldn't have that Sam Darnold conversation, because if he is let loose, why would the new guy let loose, when Shanahan could pick him up? So I think that's one of those guys, because at this point you just got to start, chopping down these branches instead of having everybody in there. And I think that's kind of the joy of the offseason is, everything is, as JJ Watt said, free agency is wild, which is absolutely true, but you got to be focused. So we don't have to have that Darnold discussion. We don't have to have the Ben Roethlisberger discussion. Do we have to have other discussions? Absolutely, because it's entertaining, it's informative, and it leads us to these places of discussion that, we're not just Joe from Livermore yelling on the radio or yelling on the TV about who we want. 2 cents of, thought into a subject really helps. So
real quick regarding Sam Darnold, I know last week I said it wouldn't make any sense for the Niners to acquire Sam Darnold, because if Kyle likes him, then it would be logical to think that Mike LaFleur would like him as well, given that LaFleur's Kyle's disciple, and then they would just keep Darnold. However, if the Jets just want to start fresh, right?
Absolutely.
Like regardless of how they might feel about Darnold, if they just want to start fresh, I could see them parting ways with Darnold.
No, I should have prefaced that. I agree, because the Jets' position, if they're going to draft Justin Fields, trade Darnold for a 2, because it's just going to up your draft stock in terms of the Jets, offloading Darnold. It's going to be to the Niners because they're having to replace. They're not trading him just to get rid of him because he's no good, so.
But just I was just going to add that, I mean, we always hear that, he's a disciple. It makes sense that this guy would like it. But a lot of times when these guys want to put their own spin on it or their own take on it, he may just say those things, but really he's like, I want to get rid of this guy. I don't really like this guy. I have my own feelings and thoughts. Maybe it's Justin Fields or somebody else. So yeah, just because he's the disciple doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't have any ideas on his own or any thoughts on his own, or doesn't really see this guy fitting the system he wants to do. And like you said, Todd, starting all new and all fresh in New York with a new face. So
the free agency still is almost a month away. And the fact that, JJ got cut was kind of the big newsmaker, and we're still waiting for the Deshaun. But kind of under the radar, but still in the NFL was, I think Urban Meyer got a cold splash of reality as to he's no longer the king of the little town. Urban Meyer, ran Utah football because he was successful. He ran Florida. He ran Ohio State. I mean, boosters, local law enforcement, everybody, he was king. He signed Chris Doyle as his, basically head athletic training person, strength guy, who had a history of issues at Iowa, went in front of the press, talked about, we've known each other for 20 years. He's been vetted, blah, blah, blah. 2 days later, he had to resign. But I think this is probably the first time in a long time that Urban Meyer has, gotten or hasn't got exactly what he wanted, which is just, again, such a stretch from why college is so different. Players, coaches, administrations, organizations. It's why Jim Harbaugh can go to Michigan and be king there. And in the NFL, he's questioned, and people are looking at him, why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? So it was just one of those things that popped up onto me, and it made me think, as I thought Urban Meyer was going to be a good coach, in Jacksonville. In fact, I don't know if I said it on this podcast. If Urban Meyer goes to Jacksonville and is successful, he has a legitimate claim to being the best football coach ever. I mean, he would have won everywhere he went in college. He goes to the pros, he wins. Unlike Nick Saban, who dominates in college, went to the pros, it was a train wreck, goes back to college, right? So I think Urban Meyer might have a little bit of, I need to reevaluate how things go because I'm no longer the king. But that's, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on it or even saw it or cared, but it was just something that popped up on the NFL slow news day.
Yeah, definitely. When I saw that, it made me chuckle a little bit because it was probably the first time, like you said, in maybe forever, I don't know, a long time at least, that somebody said no to Urban Meyer, right? To saying, look, no, you can't do what you want to do. And it was his first, I guess, experience that like Nick Saban had when he arrived into the NFL, where he, like you said, wasn't king and wasn't allowed to do pretty much anything he wanted to do. But I will give Urban Meyer a little bit of credit, or at least people have been giving him credit in regard to the Trevor Lawrence Pro Day that took place, a few days ago. I guess for those who may not know, Trevor Lawrence from Clemson had a shoulder issue with his left shoulder, and the surgery would keep him out for, I guess, the next 4 to 5 months or so. And so, in speaking between Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer encouraged him to say, hey, if you want, why don't you just do your own pro day now? Just push it up. And he got it done, and they just kind of did it. And apparently it was Urban Meyer's influence that got Trevor Lawrence's pro day. He was able to showcase himself on his own pro day early.
So you're telling me Urban might take him number one?
No, I'm just saying, he's clearly, it shows that he still has a way with players, right? In order to connect with them, to influence them. So, I mean, that's his specialty, right? That's his, but obviously he needs to learn to work within the framework of the NFL and all the, he just can't do whatever he wants.
Which, if what you're saying is Urban did indeed tell him to do his pro day ahead of time, okay. My thought was, when I saw it, was, why is he doing a pro day? This guy should be signed already. He should be getting his surgery done 2 months ago. What are you waiting for? There's nothing to know with this guy. Since he's been a freshman, number 1 pick.
Yeah. Maybe Urban.
There's no question here. I'll give you 5 first. Now I can't give you 5 first. Todd said so. So what do you want from us? I'll take Trevor Lawrence. He fit our scheme perfectly. Sit back in the pocket, and he's mobile, and he's huge. Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl. What do you want for him?
I don't know. Maybe Urban was listening to Brett Favre. Maybe Brett Favre had Urban's ear when Brett Favre said, "Hey, why don't you should take Devontae Smith as your first right. pick. Don't take Trevor Lawrence." Yeah, it's like, well, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I should see him in his pro day.
Right. Yeah.
And if you saw any part of Lawrence's pro day, there only one thing stands out. That hair is beautiful. It was perfect. He is cast out of a football movie with the long hair and then, oh, by the way, I'm going to throw it 65 yards and hit the guy right in the hand. So, I mean, he's set for, I hope all the marketing departments in Jacksonville, hair products, salons, everything. I mean, jump on board now.
Oh, for sure.
Is he like the real life version of Shane Falco, except he's going to be good?
Yes.
He's got the hair like Keanu. He's got the number 16.
Yep. Which again is like what Jerry's always saying. Why are you winning games, Jets? I'm looking at you. You had this guy and you decided to win a game. Why?
I would say, I don't know if you guys listen to Rich Eisen much, but Rich is a diehard Jets fan, right? So to hear him just every now and then bemoan, we had him and like we let him go is is so typical Jets, I guess you would say. But it's
I know they wouldn't even have to be pondering about whether or not to trade for Deshaun Watson if they kept that number 1 pick.
Right.
I don't know if you guys saw that. A pretty big name announced his retirement today from football. Anybody? Submitted his paperwork and everything.
Nope.
Tim Tebow has retired officially from the NFL.
I had no idea.
Well,
I thought he retired years ago, so
Right.
my apologies.
I should say he's also retired from baseball today. So he has decided to hang up all of his cleats, which, I mean, you want to talk about a guy who the hype was insane in college. Tim Tebow, I mean, the fact that, I don't know, I can't remember the last time a double-A baseball player announced his retirement that made any kind of wrinkle. Maybe Michael Jordan when he was riding the buses, but the fact that Tebow was out there and it made a crawl on ESPN. Tim Tebow announced his retirement. I'm like, really? Okay, I guess, talk about a following.
So the Mets invited him to spring training and he said no thanks?
Much like Willie Mays Hayes, he got cut before he even had a chance. So everything but taking his bunk bed outside.
Yeah.
So, but before we get to final thoughts, what are your inclinations as to what's going to happen before free agency? Anything, a lot, big trade, no trade, anything before final thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to just mention, I guess I saw it, I don't know, just in the news lately with some of these guys getting released, whether it was J.J. Watt or then some other talk about, maybe Von Miller's next. And I think just because of this whole pandemic and the lowering of the salary cap, we're going to see a lot of guys, more than probably we even thought, start to get released because they push salaries out for a year or two or even further, and they're going to have to start dumping some of these guys. So, which could be a good thing for us, for free agents, assuming we have some money, but more names will probably hit the market than we thought, or more than many years, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, along those lines, you're right. I suppose it could help the Niners just because they still have a good reputation around the league for these players who may want to find a winning organization and be willing to take less, because much like we've seen with Major League Baseball and how their offseason went, perhaps it might end up being a same kind of cycle in the NFL where the guys who are going to get their money are going to get their money. But there are going to be a lot of people, a lot of players scrambling, toward who aren't going to be paid the big bucks, but then there won't be any room left on these teams' cap. So they're just going to be scrambling, and perhaps the Niners will be able to scoop up some gems that we didn't know they'd be able to because of the situation.
Yep. Or if we get someone like that, more so than J.J. Watt, if all of a sudden Von Miller gets released, I'm a little more interested in adding someone like that, obviously, right? So would everybody else, and he'd probably still demand too much money, but all of a sudden some of these names pop out there that you weren't thinking about because they have to be released for friendly cap purposes. A lot of guys, like you said, looking for a smaller piece of the pie, right?
Yep.
So with that said, I think we've wrapped up another strong edition of Three Side Sports because I think we had a nice, lively debate regarding Deshaun and what it would take, which I think will be kind of a hot topic going forward. But also, I think it was important to get information out there like, hey, you can only trade 3 years worth of picks. So as much as I was on board last week with Jerry's 5 number ones, I didn't love it, but I was on board. Like, okay, let's see. Well, we got to unhook that train and go somewhere else. So now, Jerry, you've been pretty spot on, during this podcast with calling the Deshaun trade weeks before the season even ended. Saying the Niners should do whatever it takes. You threw out the 5 first rounders, so I expect you to get back to the laboratory, cook
back
up
to the drawing board.
And next week, I expect a couple proposals that will make us make us question either your sanity or your brilliance. It could go either way, much like every week. So, but Jeff, final thoughts.
Well, one thing I wanted to talk about, and you almost mentioned it earlier, and then I was going to say it earlier during one of our little debates there, but watching an interview with Zach Wilson's coach today, I want that guy. How do we trade up to get that guy? Right there from where you're sitting in Utah, man. Like that, I just think that from what I've seen from that guy, the play, everyone, what his coach has to say about him, I just think it'd be really exciting. And I don't want to see him go to the Jets because then I have to watch the Jets once in a while just to see a little bit of Zach Wilson. I just think that would be a good guy to add, right? It'd be more exciting to me than, say, Trey Lance or keeping Jimmy. But then if we draft this guy, okay, great. Let's see what he can do. So I'd like to see that happen. How can we do that? 1 first, 2 first. 2 first and a player.
Take draft capital, at least 2 firsts.
Right. So then, but we know
for this year and the following year.
We know Salah. He's not going to be as, so maybe there's something we can work out there. I don't know. Come on. Let's get Zach Wilson in here.
But that's the thing. If you're willing to invest that draft capital into an unknown, as much as you love Zach Wilson, it just seems to make more sense to put that into Deshaun, where he's a known quantity. And I think that's been my main thing, especially, it's funny you mentioned Tim Tebow retiring today, because remember when he came out, despite some of the detractors, I mean, there's still a lot of people who are on board with Tim Tebow and how great he was going to be. And not even a guy like Tim Tebow, but I think of guys like Nathan Peterman. I remember when he came out for the draft, people were all talking about how, what a gem, what a hidden gem he is and what a steal. But then he turned out to be nothing more than a backup at best. So I think it's really, I guess to me, it's even riskier to just put your eggs in that basket of, hey, we're just going to draft a guy because we just need a quarterback. So we're going to draft a guy, but you don't know. I mean, you got to draft the right guy. You got to get the guy that's, which is obvious. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, I'm not saying anything that anybody would disagree with, but you know where I'm getting at, right? Just that it's hard for me to listen to people saying, oh, we just got to draft one. Because, you got to draft a good one. You got to make sure it's good, not just anyone at any spot, right? So, yeah.
But assuming the Deshaun part is out of it, I'm just saying, this guy.
I hear you. And since Todd is in Utah today, really, it's incumbent on him to drive to Zach's house,
right?
Tell him, John Elway. Right? Just pull a John Elway. Say you're gonna go play baseball. Even if you've never played baseball before. I don't even know if he's a baseball player, but said you're gonna go play baseball unless he gets to go to the Niners.
There you go.
Well, we can always pull an Ace Ventura and just kidnap Zach Wilson until the draft and make that happen. So, but Jerry, do you have final thoughts?
So I know this is only our 12th episode, but I've been just wondering how many people are out there listening to us. And you've sort of touched upon it in the very beginning, is that in terms of getting feedback. So if you're a listener, it'd be awesome if you could rate our podcast and leave a note in the comments section. In fact, what we really like to start up perhaps is a mailbag segment and answer any and all of your questions you might have, whether it be about the Niners, the NFL in general, or even questions concerning other sports like NBA or Major League Baseball, because as we all know, pitchers and catchers reported today. So I think I could speak for the rest of us in saying that we just love to hear from you, and we'd love to start a dialogue.
Excellent. You've taken the ending out of it. So yes, I agree. In today's day and age, we don't have to wait for the newspaper to come out and mail in your letter to the editor to, get a response. We're in today's day and age, it's a click away. Technology will allow you to get those questions and comments to us. Whether you think, Jerry's crazy for offering 5 number ones, or you think it's the most brilliant move ever. Let us know. We'd love to have this discussion with the fans and the listeners. So I agree with that. I'd like to take my final thought and talk about greatness, because we're a couple weeks removed from the Super Bowl now, and Tom Brady won number 7. And to me, he is now the greatest winner in the NFL. He has done something that not only has never been done, but it's hard to forecast whether anyone could even do that again. 7 championships. But it also got me thinking about greatness. So does Tom Brady's 7 championships mean more than all the records that Jerry Rice blew by? Jerry Rice eclipsed receiving records that the number 2 guy hasn't even come close to sniffing. They aren't within 5 years of good productivity. So does Tom's greatness trump Jerry's greatness? And if you're talking about records, Wayne Gretzky eclipsed more records faster than any professional athlete ever. Plus he won championships. How great is the great one? All this leads me to the fact that as I was flipping through SportsCenter, I came across Serena Williams. There's a good chance I've watched 0 tennis matches in the past 10 years, completely, outside of a few highlights. The fact that Serena is 39 years old and moving on to the quarters or the semifinals in the Australian Open and holds, I don't know, 17 Grand Slam titles or something ridiculous like that, it just made me want people to put aside the idea of this is the GOAT or this is the greatest and just enjoy the greatness. Because Jerry's greatness for all of us might mean more than Tom's greatness to Patriot fans. And listen, this is coming from a guy who was baptized in the Church of Joe Montana. So the fact that I am willing to enjoy or at least concede that the greatness is out there and more people should enjoy it across all the realms, including these other sports that you might not even care about that much, but just to appreciate the greatness that some of these competitors are on, it's a chance to enjoy more greatness. So thank you, Tom, for bringing that to light. So that was my final thoughts on the episode. With all that said, rate, like, and comment on the podcast. Send us questions. We'll be hopefully handling a mailbag next week. And then in next week's episode, I will not be in Utah. However, I can't confirm where I will be. That is literally for me still up in the air. So until next time, enjoy, thank you, and we'll see you next week. Good night.